Listen, from untold stories to iconic events and moments, man, take a trip with me back in time. And let's check out 20 rare historical photos that will leave you speechless. Let's go.
If a picture is worth 1,000 words, then these historical photos are worth entire volumes, especially since they show the lesser-known stories buried by time. From a dog that became a prisoner of war to one of history's weirdest fads, here are 20 rare historical photos that will leave you speechless and you need to see. Number 2. Number 20. The dog who became a prisoner of war. Meet Judy, the only dog to have ever been a prisoner of war during World War II. Judy, a liver-and-white English pointer, was originally part of the military as the mascot of the Royal Navy aboard HMS Grasshopper. Her early life was filled with adventures, from serving on the bustling ship to surviving a shipwreck in the South China Sea. Marooned on a deserted island with the surviving crew, Judy's keen senses saved lives when she discovered a freshwater spring, a resource that meant the difference between life and death for the stranded sailors. After a harrowing escape from the island, Judy and the crew trekked through the dense jungles of Sumatra, where she and her crew needed to survive crocodiles and tigers. But that wasn't the end of their journey. Soon after, the group was captured and taken to a Japanese prisoner of war camp in Medan, Sumatra. Despite the brutal conditions, Judy's loyalty to her human companions never wavered. And so Frank Williams, the leading aircraftman who bonded with Judy, devised a cunning plan to protect her. One evening, after getting the camp's commandant drunk, Williams managed to have Judy officially registered as a prisoner of war under the name 81A Glogura Medan. This unprecedented act meant that Judy received the same treatment and rations as the human prisoners, ensuring her survival in the harsh conditions. Finally, in 1945, after years of hardship, the camp was liberated, and Judy finally returned to the UK with Williams. Her bravery was recognized with the prestigious Dickin Medal, often called the animal's Victoria Cross, awarded for magnificent courage and endurance in Japanese prison camps. Before we go on,
and you wonder why people treat dogs and different things like humans, like they love them like humans. Like when they say that's their babies, bro. That loyalty is it's hard to find in humans.
Like this video, smash the subscribe button and click the notification bell right now. Number 19. A man, a beard, and cats. Everyone is said to have 15 minutes of fame, and even Louis Coulon had his moment under the spotlight. Not for remarkable achievements or heroic bravery, but for the length of his beard. Born in 1826 in the small French village of Vadnais, Louis was destined for a life less ordinary, especially after he decided to give up shaving. By the age of 14, Louis's beard had already reached an impressive length of nearly 20 inches, and from there, it only grew longer and more unruly. By 1904, his beard measured an astonishing 11 feet. Louis worked as a metallurgist in a sweltering iron foundry. You'd think an 11-foot beard would be quite the hindrance, but Louis had a clever solution. He would wrap his beard into a sort of mattress that he tucked under his shirt, ensuring it didn't get in the way while he worked near molten metal. However, growing his beard isn't just a random choice for Louis. You see, his beard served as a cozy resting spot for his beloved cats, who were often photographed nestled comfortably within the thick folds of his whiskers. This oddity turned him into a local celebrity, and his image was plastered across countless postcards, making him a familiar face throughout France. So the next time you see a photo of a man with an insane beard posing with cats, you'll know that's probably Louis, bonding with his beloved felines.
Listen, if you've ever grown a beard, any length, like where it comes down and you really gotta take care of it, maintenance, all that type of stuff like that, bro, you can respect that because you know that comes with a lot, man. Food getting all in it, all kind of different. There's no telling what he found in his beard.
Number 18. The weird Victorian bathing machines. Bathing machines are arguably one of the oddest things in history. The norms of the 18th and 19th century were far different from today. Back then, women who would like to enjoy the seaside needed to wear bathing suits that covered most of their bodies and be in bathing machines. These wooden, often elaborately decorated carts equipped with wheels were a staple at beaches across Britain and other parts of Europe. The typical bathing machine was about 6 feet high and 8 feet wide, with a peaked roof and doors at both ends. One door faced the shore, allowing the bather to enter and change out of their street clothes in privacy. The machine would then be rolled into the water, often by horses or human attendants, where the bather could exit from the other door, now shielded from the prying eyes of beachgoers, and step directly into the sea. Some, like those used by Queen Victoria, were outfitted with plush interiors, mirrors, and even a small veranda. Victoria's bathing machine, for example, had a silken net to prevent her children from entering the water accidentally. However, as social attitudes began to shift in the late 19th century, the rigid moral codes that necessitated such privacy started to erode. By the early 20th century, with mixed-gender bathing becoming more accepted, the bathing machine fell out of favor, replaced by beach huts and open swim areas. Number 17. New York police and their catwalk cars. In the 1950s and 60s, the New York Port Authority police used an ingenious and quirky method to patrol the Holland and Lincoln tunnels: tiny electric catwalk cars. These miniature vehicles, no more than 2 feet wide, were specially designed to navigate the narrow catwalks that ran alongside the tunnel's main traffic lanes. These cars were first introduced in 1955 as a solution to the cumbersome process of having officers patrol the tunnels on foot. Equipped with a 3-horsepower electric motor, the catwalk cars could reach speeds of up to 12 miles per hour, allowing officers to quickly respond to emergencies, clear traffic jams.
You know what? Now I see where those little vehicles come from that come behind the street sweepers. You ever seen those? Excuse me. You ever seen those? They give you the ticket if you're on the wrong side of the street up north when the street sweeper come through them little bit. Now I see where they come from. I see now.
Or even assist in accidents within the tunnel. The cars were bidirectional, meaning officers could drive them in either direction without turning around, thanks to a swivel seat in the small glass-enclosed cabin. It might be rather comical and funny to watch, but hey, it was efficient. Around 2011, however, these catwalk cars were eventually phased out by modern surveillance technologies. Number 16. Horse buses. You're looking at a horse bus, a popular mode of transportation in 1890s London. Unlike modern buses, horse buses are powered by, well, horses. The typical horse bus was a double-decker with passengers seated on 2 levels. Each bus was typically drawn by 2 or sometimes 4 horses, depending on the terrain and the weight of the passengers. The horses worked in shifts, as the demands of pulling these heavy vehicles were intense. A horse could only work a few hours before needing rest, which meant that a single-horse bus company might need as many as 10 horses for every bus in service to maintain regular operations. Number 15. The mystery of Austa Derer. Alzheimer's disease is one of the most perplexing and devastating medical mysteries of our time. Imagine someone you know suddenly losing awareness and their ability to speak and slowly shriveling away. It was first identified over a century ago by Dr. Alois Alzheimer. While it's now known as a neurodegenerative disease, we still don't know its cause. This is Austa Derer. Born in 1850 in Germany, Augusta led a relatively ordinary life until her mid-50s when she began to exhibit unusual symptoms: memory loss, confusion, and increasingly erratic behavior. Her husband, unable to care for her, admitted her to a psychiatric hospital in Frankfurt, where she came under the care of Dr. Alois Alzheimer. Dr. Alzheimer was struck by Augusta's case because, unlike many others suffering from similar symptoms at the time, she was relatively young, just 51 years old. This early onset of dementia, combined with the severity of her symptoms, intrigued Dr. Alzheimer. When Austa Derer passed away in 1906, Dr. Alzheimer performed an autopsy on her brain. Using newly developed staining techniques, Alzheimer observed abnormal clumps of protein, now known as amyloid plaques, and tangled bundles of fiber, called neurofibrillary tangles. These findings were groundbreaking, as they provided the first clear evidence of the physical changes in the brain associated with dementia. That was how Alzheimer's disease was identified. Yet today, over a century after his death, we still don't know the cause of plaques and protein deposits that lead to this heartbreaking disease. Number 14. The toy with radioactive materials. In the early 1950s, when the world was fascinated by the power of the atom, A.C. Gilbert, a famous toy maker, introduced one of the most extraordinary and controversial educational toys ever made, the Gilbert U-238 Atomic Energy Lab. The science kit was quite realistic, far too realistic that it had real radioactive materials. The kit, which originally sold for $49.50, a hefty sum equivalent to around $630 today, included a Geiger counter, a cloud chamber, an electroscope, and even 4 jars of uranium-bearing ores. It allowed children to observe the path of electrons and alpha particles traveling at incredible speeds and conduct various experiments that demonstrated the principles of nuclear physics. It sounds educational, but uranium included in it is deadly. Even so, it was marketed as safe, with assurances from the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. Due to its high cost and the niche audience it appealed to, the Atomic Energy Lab was only available for a short period, from 1950 to 1951, before it was pulled from the market. Today, it's remembered as one of the most dangerous toys ever sold. Number 13. When the truth behind asbestos was hidden. In the 1950s, asbestos was hailed as a miracle material, used in everything from construction materials to household products due to its fire-resistant and insulating properties. It was woven into fabrics, sprayed onto ceilings, mixed into cement, and even found in everyday items like ironing boards and hair dryers. The widespread use of asbestos was driven by its versatility and effectiveness, making it a staple in various industries, especially construction and manufacturing. But, well, you must know already that asbestos is far from the miracle material that it is. Rather than a versatile material, asbestos is deadly. As early as the 1920s, there were reports linking asbestos exposure to serious health issues, including lung disease and cancer, particularly mesothelioma, a rare and aggressive cancer almost exclusively caused by asbestos exposure. By the 1950s, there was substantial evidence of the dangers posed by asbestos fibers, which, when inhaled, could lodge in the lungs and lead to fatal illnesses. Despite this, the asbestos industry engaged in a concerted effort to downplay and hide the truth about the dangers of asbestos. Internal documents from the period reveal that companies were aware of the health risks, but
I hope y'all are listening to that, because that's still happening now. We just don't have the name for it, for who's doing it, with what product, but it's still happening. That's crazy, bro. Like, I keep telling you, man, they don't care about us.
chose to suppress this information to protect their profits. They conducted secret research, manipulated public relations campaigns, and even lobbied against regulations that would limit asbestos use or require warnings about its dangers. In the 1950s, the company, aware of the mounting evidence of asbestos-related illnesses among its workers, deliberately withheld information and falsified records to avoid liability. Employees were often kept in the dark about the risks they faced, and those who did develop illnesses were sometimes coerced into settlements that prevented them from speaking out. The extent of the cover-up didn't come to full light until the 1970s and 1980s, when lawsuits and investigative journalism began to expose the lengths to which companies had gone to protect their bottom line at the expense of public health. The aftermath has been devastating. Asbestos-related diseases have claimed hundreds of thousands of lives, and the material is now banned or heavily restricted in many countries. Number 12.
So remember that. Remember that. They don't care, bro. They let the workers, knowing it was bad for their health, continue to work there and deal with that and work with that stuff. So the next time you see something go down and a company make a statement and they're like, well, we didn't know. Don't believe that. Don't believe that. Make them show you proof that they ain't know. Otherwise, they knew.
Albert Einstein's desk after death. On the 18th of April, 1955, one of the greatest minds in history, Albert Einstein, passed away at the age of 76. One of the most iconic photos captured after his death is his cluttered desk, where the genius had spent his final hours. This desk, located in his office at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey, was left exactly as it was the time of his death. Papers were strewn across the surface, filled with calculations and notes, reflecting the mind of a man who was still deeply engaged in his work until the very end. Einstein's last unfinished project, which lay among the papers on his desk, was an attempt to develop a unified field theory, a theoretical framework that would unify the forces of nature into a single equation. This was the culmination of decades of thought and work, a final challenge that Einstein, despite his best efforts, could not solve before his passing. Not only is this photo one of Albert Einstein's legacies, but it also started debates about what productivity really looks like. A squeaky clean workspace leads to clear thinking, but hey, perhaps for some people, a messy desk is just what they need to quantify the forces of nature. So if you work better with clutter all around you, there's no judgment here.
I know people who work in environments like that, and they say it's called controlled chaos. They know exactly where everything is when they get ready to go put their hands on it. Controlled chaos is what they call it.
Number 11. Phone booth stuffing. Over the past decade, we've witnessed a lot of bizarre fads and trends. With how quickly someone can share something on the internet, these things come and go, with one trend being replaced by another in less than a year. However, trends and fads existed even in the 20th century. One of the weirdest trends is phone booth stuffing, a bizarre craze that involves cramming as many people as possible into a single phone booth. Why? Well, just like modern fads and trends, there's almost always no reason, and it begins randomly. One fine day in 1959 at the Durban YMCA in South Africa, 25 students managed to squeeze into a single phone booth. This somehow spread, and the fad quickly reached the United States, where it became a full-blown craze on college campuses. The phenomenon didn't last long, as most fads go. By the early 1960s, the novelty had worn off, and phone booth stuffing faded into obscurity. Number 10. Kon Wald City, what was once the most densely packed place on Earth. 30,000 people in 6.4 acres. That's the definition of the phrase packed like a can of sardines. Yes, this was the reality to people who once lived in Kon Wald City, one of the most densely populated and notorious places on Earth. Originally a Chinese military fort, the walled city evolved into an autonomous zone, largely free from governmental oversight after the British leased the surrounding new territories from China in 1898. Over the decades, especially after World War II, it grew into a sprawling, unregulated settlement. Without formal government control, Kon Wald City developed its own set of rules, where residents constructed towering interconnected buildings with little regard for safety codes or urban planning. Narrow alleys barely wide enough for a single person were lined with shops, schools, restaurants, and factories. The absence of official law enforcement allowed a thriving underground economy to flourish, including unlicensed dental clinics and food production businesses that operated without health inspections. Of course, a place not governed by law was bound to fail. By the 1980s, the overcrowding and deteriorating conditions prompted both the British and Chinese governments to take action. In 1993, after years of negotiation, the walled city was demolished, and today, the Kon Wald City Park stands in its place, a far cry from the city that once stood in its space. Number 9. Flying in the 1950s. Flying in the 1950s was a far cry from the packed economy cabins we know today. You can say that the economy in the 1950s would be comparable to flying in today's first class. The seats in economy during the 1950s won't make you yearn for more. Legroom was ample, with seats that reclined far enough to make long flights genuinely comfortable. Passengers had space to stretch out, and the cabins were far less crowded than they are today. The aisle width and seat pitch, which is the distance between rows, was comparable to what you'd find in today's premium economy or even first class on some airlines. Passengers were treated to multi-course meals served on real china, with silverware, and sometimes even with a glass of champagne to toast their journey.
Like, they look like they're actually having a good time. They could probably sell me on an airplane flight. You know what I mean? They look like they're enjoying it. These photos I see today of people on airplanes, I'm like, man, no thank you.
Food was often prepared by chefs and included gourmet options, a stark contrast to the packaged snacks and pre-prepared meals common in modern economy flights. However, the price of flying back then was comparably more expensive than a single economy ticket today. Airplanes are also much safer today. Albeit, of course, the new business model involves packing as many passengers as possible into a single flight to maximize profit. But hey, at least turbulence isn't a cause for concern when you're tens of thousands of feet up in the air. Number 8. Overhead cradles. Several photos from the 1950s will make you realize that quite a lot of inventions centered around infants and young ones were rather counterintuitive and reckless, to say the least. Just take a look at this one. You're looking at a photo of a sky cot, or an overhead cradle designed for infants on long-haul flights. These sky cots were essentially hammock-like contraptions that clip securely to the luggage racks above passengers' heads. They were intended to provide comfort and safety for babies during the flight, allowing them to sleep while their parents relaxed. The design was thoughtful, with sides high.
No, it ain't. You basically saying, okay, before overhead compartments, this what we put back. This is what went in overhead compartments back then, bro. And any type of turbulence, oh my God, talk about concussion for that baby. No, this wasn't a good idea at all, I don't think.
Enough to prevent the baby from tumbling out during mild turbulence, a feature that was critical in an era when seatbelts for infants were practically unheard of. Modern airlines have, of course, moved away from such adventurous seating arrangements, with cradles now securely attached at seat level and safety regulations far more stringent. Whew! I can't imagine a mother's anxiety while looking at her child hanging above her head during turbulence. Number 7. Charlie Chaplain without makeup. Charlie Chaplain is one of the most popular names in history. Most people know him for acting in silent comedy films and for his iconic face makeup. However, behind his actor persona was a writer, director, composer, and one of the most influential figures in the history of cinema. Without his makeup, Chaplin was strikingly different. His face, naturally expressive, lacked the comical exaggeration that makeup provided. No wonder there are claims about Charlie Chaplin losing his own look-alike contest. While this bit of history is unproven, seeing him without makeup makes it believable. Number 6. Hidden mothers in the Victorian era. Here's another bizarre photo that came from the Victorian era. Here, you see photos of infants, and behind them are their mothers holding them, except that their entire face and body are covered. These people are the hidden mothers of the Victorian era. The logic behind these rather creepy photos is quite simple. Young ones tend to be restless, and being on their mother's lap proved to be effective in keeping them still for the long exposure times required by early cameras. As creepy as this practice was a practical solution to a technical problem of the time. In some images, you can see a vague outline of the mother's figure, making the adorable photo somewhat creepy. Fortunately, modern cameras, Photoshop, and editing tools are available now. Number 5.
Yeah, none of my kids could sit still long enough to take pictures and do all that type of stuff, or either get haircuts or anything like that. They were always super active, and yeah, pictures, disaster. We don't have many.
Old receipt. An old receipt is not necessarily historical, but with how astronomical the price difference is between this old receipt and the one you'd expect to see now, people are hailing this photo as a great find. This is a photo of a 30-year-old supermarket receipt, and you can only weep at how cheap products were back then. Minced beef for 55 pence or 69 cents? You can't imagine the price today, which is almost 10 times more expensive. Want premium beef burgers? Easy. That's £1 39 pence, or $1.75. Crazy. In 1994, a typical shopping trip at Tesco could cost you around £29 for about 27 items, including essentials like beef, cooking oil, and even a newspaper. Today, that same basket of goods would set you back nearly £60 or $79. Inflation is real and painful. Number 4. The woman dubbed as the ugliest in the world. We all lead different lives, with some enduring more than others. Marianne Bevan's life is one that's riddled with pain. She got married, had kids, and led a normal life. In 1914, however, everything changed when Marianne's husband passed away, leaving her and her 4 young children alone. As if that wasn't enough, she began to suffer from macromegaly, a rare condition caused by a benign tumor on the pituitary gland, which led to excessive growth hormone production. This condition drastically altered her appearance, causing her facial features, hands, and feet to grow disproportionately large. Marianne Bevan passed away in 1933, knowing that she had tried everything she could to keep her children fed. Number 3.
Man, I can't do nothing but respect that right there, bro. By any means necessary, we're gonna make sure we eat. They eat before I do. You know what I mean? And what they tell you, beauty, it's in the eyes of the beholder. Don't let somebody tell you you ugly or something like that, man. No.
Japan Soba delivery. Imagine yourself traveling back in time, just a little, say around the early 20th century in Japan. As you walk around, you might come across several men on bicycles balancing towering stacks of boxes on their shoulders, darting through narrow alleys and busy markets. Someone outside Japan might not be able to guess correctly just what these men are delivering. Soba, the buckwheat noodle dish that has been a staple in Japanese cuisine for centuries. In the 20th century, getting soba would mean receiving them from these soba delivery men, known as sobaya. By the early 1900s, as cities like Tokyo began to modernize, the demand for quick and convenient food options grew. This is where the sobaya came into the picture. These men would stack multiple bowls of soba, sometimes up to a dozen or more, in a special wooden carrier. This stack could reach nearly 4 feet high, and the sobaya would balance this precarious load on one hand while steering a bicycle with the other. The streets of Tokyo weren't paved like they are today. They were often uneven and crowded, making this feat even more impressive. However, as Japan continued to modernize, the practice of soba delivery by bicycle gradually faded away, and so seeing these photos is probably nostalgic for those who have once seen these delivery men on the streets. Number 2. Macaroni the pony. Corgis are not only known for their fluffy behinds, but also for being the beloved pet of the late Queen Elizabeth. As for the past animal residents of the White House, however, we don't have canines, but rather a pony, a Shetland pony named Macaroni. You might be surprised to see photos of the cute pony roaming around the White House back in the 1960s. Macaroni was the pet of none other than Caroline Kennedy, the daughter of President John F. Kennedy. In the early 1960s, the Kennedy family was the epitome of American charm and charisma, and their life in the White House was followed closely by the public. Among the many stories that captured the nation's imagination was that of Macaroni, who was a gift to young Caroline from Lyndon B. Johnson, who would later become president after JFK's assassination. Macaroni wasn't just a private family pet. He became a beloved figure in the media, often photographed trotting around the White House grounds with Caroline, sometimes even appearing in official portraits. Macaroni's fame even led to him being featured in popular culture. He was mentioned in songs, and his image was widely circulated in newspapers and magazines. In fact, he became so well known that he was even given the honorary title of the first pony. And now, it's time for today's topic. This is a rare historical photo that you need to see. This historical photo captures a moment that reflects a pivotal time in history when women began to challenge and reshape rigid societal norms. You're looking at Brigitte Bardot, one of the famous actresses of the 1950s. This particular photo was captured during the Cannes Festival, and it often boggles people's minds when they realize that around this time, famed artist Pablo Picasso was still alive. In fact, Brigitte is one of the few people who had the privilege of taking a photo with the artist. It's astounding to think just how different today's societal norms are from the 1950s. Can you think about things in the 21st century that might surprise a person living in the 1950s? I'll go first. I bet people in the 1950s never even imagined that casual clothing styles would be considered fashionable. Self-driving cars were also something people in the 50s never imagined. What about you? Let me know in the comments down below. Number 1. The German obsession with posing with polar bear mascots. If you look at old photos taken in 20th century Germany, you might find several that stand out because of the presence of a polar bear mascot. Now, this mascot doesn't really represent a brand. Simply put, Germany just had a bizarre obsession with polar bears. The origin of this obsession with posing with polar bear mascots dates back to the early 20th century. Born in captivity at the Berlin Zoological Garden in 2006 is a polar bear named Knut. As the first polar bear cub to survive past infancy at the zoo in over 3 decades, he captured the hearts of millions. not just in Germany, but worldwide. Crowds flocked to the zoo daily to see the adorable cub, and soon, his image was everywhere, from merchandise to advertising campaigns. Even before Canute, however, Berliners and visitors have long been fascinated with these white bears. In Germany, the polar bear was seen as a symbol of strength and resilience, and it wasn't long before the bear found its way into the realm of marketing and public appearances. And so throughout the mid-20th century, during the height of Germany's Wirtschaftswunder, or economic miracle, polar bear mascots became a common sight at various public events, especially in Berlin. Whether at sports matches, Christmas markets, or local festivals, these mascots served as entertainers and ambassadors. People were drawn to the mascot's playful and friendly demeanor, and it became a popular activity to pose for photos with them. Today, posing with polar bear mascots remains a beloved pastime in the nation, especially during the winter months when these figures are more likely to be found at various events and celebrations. History truly is fascinating. Perhaps you know other weird or befuddling things in history.